I was actually in the pub with my mates, and it was reported in the local newspaper, and we were playing pool on a Sunday night, and my mobile phone went, and I think the chief whip had heard that I was just a bit annoyed with Theresa May, and said she could at least ring round and say how we all doing, and for our team as well, because my team of 5 lost their jobs, and I hung on to try and see them through and look after them. So my phone rang, and it was Theresa May, and I said to my mates, I'll just go outside in the car park, I've got the Prime Minister on the phone.
I'm back in Parliament once again in a Member of Parliament's office, and I'm really chuffed today that we've got a focus onto the light blue part of our armed forces with an RAF veteran, and that's Jason McCartney MP. How are you, Jason?
Good to see you, Johnny. Welcome to Portcullis House. We're on the 4th floor of Portcullis House, and lots of MPs have their offices here. In fact, Priti Patel is just down the way here.
Yeah, I always ask MPs who your neighbours are, because that sometimes reveals a lot about relationships as well. And also, you get to see in these interviews different levels of offices. From when my wife was working for Mark Lancaster, they were deep in the basement of this place. So you definitely see a variety as you go around this place. But like with all of our guests, it's really good to just wind it right back to the beginning and talk about your military career, because I know you've got close familial links with the armed forces. But can you tell us a little bit about, obviously the family connection and why you decided to join the Royal Air Force?
Yeah, I come from a Royal Air Force family. Both my mum and dad were in the RAF. They both joined as teenagers, and they met in the Royal Air Force. I am here because of the Royal Air Force, because that's where they met. I think my mum was like a secretary, a typist, and she worked for senior officers. They met in Germany, RAF Germany. My dad joined straight after school as well with no qualifications. He played a lot of rugby. He played for the Air Force, and he played for Middlesbrough Rugby Club, which were really, really good at the time. And thanks to the RAF, my dad went to night school. He worked really hard. He got some A-levels because he joined with no qualifications. And he eventually got a commission and worked his way up. So very, very proud of him. Interestingly, because my mum got pregnant with me while in the RAF, she had to leave. Obviously, times have changed. But yeah, I am here because of the Royal Air Force.
So growing up, were they encouraging you to join the armed forces, or was it something you kind of came to your own decision?
I was always into sort of creative things, so I was always quite strong on English and writing and essays, but I also did a lot of adventurous things, so I was always in the Scouts, I was in the Air Cadets. So I used to go flying training at RAF Woodvale near Liverpool, little chipmunk aircraft, doing a bit of aerobatics and things like that. So it was always in the back of my mind. And I think I saw what it did for my mum and dad in terms of setting them up for life. I love the sense of adventure, the confidence that it gives you, but the camaraderie and the team spirit. So it was always sort of something in the back of my mind.
What's really struck me is I've gone around talking to members of Parliament and other politicians about their reasons of joining the armed forces or getting into politics. There's been one common factor, and that's family. There's always been my father, my mother. Sir Ian Duncan Smith's probably the most poignant story when he talks about his father, who was a Spitfire ace, and he revealed quite a very revealing conversation they had during one of his operational deployments when he'd finally made decisions to join the army. And the list goes on, really. So I think the power of that family-linked service is something that shouldn't be overlooked, because it's produced a lot of members of our armed forces, and subsequently, from what I'm doing here, MPs as well, quite frankly.
Well, it is a big family, but I think it's the lifestyle. So certainly living in Germany, my dad was at RAF Wildenrath, and then Rhein-Dahl, and he got promoted from flight lieutenant to squadron leader while we were in Germany. So he was very lucky. He got a posting from Germany to another German posting. But the opportunity as a young kid living abroad, and the base was full. So we actually lived in a German village, in a rented. So our neighbours were German.
Did you learn German as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So there's a guy called Bodo who works here in Parliament, and I speak to in German in the morning. I picked it up. I used to go to the bakery in the morning and go, "Acht Brötchen bitte, 8 bread rolls, please." I think I must have said it with so much confidence and with the German accent. They would then sometimes follow up in German asking me, did I want a wheat, brown or wholemeal? And of course I didn't know what the answer was to that. But certainly getting that confidence with languages. We lived just on the Dutch border near a place called Roermond and Eindhoven. We travelled extensively. We had a caravan. We'd go down to Garmisch-Partenkirchen, down to Bavaria. We'd go down to Italy. So having those opportunities. But remember, my dad joined with no qualifications at all. You know, he came from a big family, 7 brothers and sisters. His dad was in the Merchant Navy. But the Air Force made him. He got a commission and worked his way up. But, you know, as a non-commissioned person in the 70s, the wages were really, really poor. I can remember, you know, my mum and dad saving up for a Christmas present in a savings club. Their houses were in the married quarters weren't very good at all. There was no central heating. And my dad would go away on detachments to places like Libya. And my mum was on her own with me and my little brother. And, you know, it was, you know, tough going. There was no phone in the house or anything like that. And I was just telling you earlier, I fell off a coal bunker and cracked my head and had quite a really bad head injury. And my dad was away. You know, my mum trying to get in touch with my grandparents to come and help and drive 3 hours. It was quite tough. But, you know, the Air Force, the military gives you that sense of resilience and sort of family spirit. So
I think it does. And that opportunity you spoke about, how a lot of people, it's not why they join a course in order to, lots of people do run away from backgrounds where they're from, but it does definitely make people and gives that social elevation, that empowerment to improve their lives, quite frankly. And we know that having a job is the best life chance that you'll have to get yourself. I mean, I can really relate to that. My own family, I don't come from a military family at all, apart from grandparents. But my dad got us out of southeast London, and that was through work, through an apprenticeship, through the boom that was happening at the time in construction, and that gave us the life chances that we've got. And it shouldn't be overlooked, that power of a job in order to improve people's lives. I'm glad you mentioned caravanning. As a recent convert to the caravan fraternity, or friends of mine call it a shed dragger, those holidays must have given you good memories as well as a family, getting across Europe as a young person.
Yeah, that, you know, as a kid, sort of going down to northern Italy, going down to southern Germany, and sometimes in the snow as well. So it was absolutely freezing. But just saying, look, I did recruiting for the Royal Air Force for a couple of years. You know, for any young person, I would say joining the military, not for your whole career, but certainly to kickstart the rest of your career. The sense of adventure, the structure, the training, the team spirit, the camaraderie, the friendships. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I'm a conservative because I believe in giving people opportunities. So I didn't go to university first up. I joined the Royal Air Force. My eldest daughter, who's 19, she's gone into retail, and she's in a junior management role, and she's flourishing. If we can just get every young person, you know, into work where they make friendships, they have that team spirit, they have that structure, and they start earning for themselves and they get a real stake in society. I really think that's the backbone of our country. And there are so many military vacancies at the moment. We had an event here in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting to the RAF recruitment team. There's all sorts of things, everything from obviously working as a chef. Why not come in the Royal Air Force and learn to be a chef and travel the world, and go to Akrotiri in Cyprus and go on a detachment and go to Las Vegas like I did, and then maybe, don't tell the recruitment team this, leave after 8 or 9 years and go and work in a top restaurant. But it sets you up, have that sense of adventure. You know, the opportunities are there. And the Navy, the adverts, I love the advert, the Navy advert, where it's the Geordie lad, you know, made in Newcastle, but, you know, the heart's in the Navy. and they show all the places in the world where the Royal Navy are on deployment at the moment. What a great opportunity for young people.
I think the Army and RAF can learn a lot from the Navy's recruitment. Though I do say the Royal Marines, whenever there's a military programme on like SAS Who Dares Wins, the Royal Marines buy up the advertising slot in between the ad breaks. Genius, but you can't beat those Royal Navy adverts because you're completely bang on. In fact, the best restaurant where I live is run by an Army chef. It's this amazing barbecue tapas style restaurant. Ex-Army chef, very proud of that. He's even got like a bit of uniform in the toilets in a frame. But he is getting awards. He learnt his craft in the Army. What better way to learn your craft? And you mentioned that he did recruitment, so basically a salesperson for those walking through the door to join the RAF. But what else did you get up to with the RAF during your time? Any operational deployments of significance?
Yeah, when like most young people, I wanted to be a pilot. In fact, I went through the selection at Biggin Hill, and I had the aptitude for it. I wasn't really someone that was into computer games, but when I did the computer tests, I had the good aptitude for it. But unfortunately, my eyesight isn't perfect, and they found that, and I wear contact lenses now.
Same.
So initially, I trained as a fighter controller, so scopies, looking at computer screens and directing the aircraft to go and intercept the Russian bombers that are coming over the North Sea, which is happening all the time. But I didn't want to spend all my life in a bunker looking at a radar screen, so I changed branch to do personnel, general duties, ground issues. So I did recruitment and court martials and finance and procurement and discipline. I was in charge of the RAF police on deployments. I did 2 great deployments. I went to Incirlik in Turkey for Operation Warden, the operation of the no-fly zone over northern Iraq, which John Major brought in to protect the Kurds. I then had the opportunity to fly into northern Iraq, into Zakho, and stayed there for a while. It was basically a fortified house with the Peshmerga protecting us. And then we drove around the local villages, letting all the Kurdish people know that the aircraft above were friendly and from the coalition. I then also had a detachment in Las Vegas on red flag.
Someone's got to do it.
I know, and this is the. I've got a couple of stories which unfortunately aren't repeatable, but it was a fantastic deployment. Basically, we go and do. It sounds fun. It was fun, but the serious part of it is that our pilots can go and do low flying training over the desert. The skies are clear. The American Air Force love doing training with Royal Air Force pilots because they know we're the best. They're the second best, and they like to train with us. And there's no issues with low flying. Obviously, people who live in the Lake District know with tornadoes doing low flying, it disrupts schools and farmers and farm animals. So if you go and take it out to the desert, you can do all your good low flying training without disrupting people's lives. But it's a really, really good deployment. But look, the opportunities, as I say, for young people to say you can go and be part of that. Join up, go and see your careers, people.
Well, we dragged our shed to North Wales on holiday a couple of weeks ago, and I have to say thank you, the Royal Air Force, for providing the entertainment to a 3-year-old. She's obsessed with Waka Wakas, Chinooks, and she's also, and we had typhoons and obviously the Hawks coming down from RAF Valley as well. So that provided a great amount of entertainment for a 3-year-old, and also me, by the way.
I love helicopters. I still go. I've been in them. I've abseiled out the back of a Chinook with the ramp down, which was amazing. Feeling the power of the twin rotor Chinook. Yeah. How it gets off the ground, I have no idea. And then I went to do air sea rescue at RAF Valley in Anglesey, because you go and do an adventure weekend there. And they were always after people to go and pretend to be on the cliffs to be rescued. So you'd go and get dropped off halfway down a cliff, and then they would come and pick you up in the Sea King, as it was in the time. And being winched up, I don't know if anyone's had the chance to be winched up to a helicopter, feeling the power of the rotor blades and this massive piece of metal, and it's just hovering there in the sky. The aerodynamics and how it actually works is absolutely incredible.
I'm obsessed with Chinooks. I think for us, I say that the Chinook was the soundtrack to Afghanistan, really, because that's. And then whenever I hear it, I run out of the house, just look up at the sky, and my little girl, as a 3-year-old, she's already got it. But
they're even in BFG. the big friendly giant.
Are they?
At the end, yeah. The helicopters fly over the Chinooks. So
that's going to be a nice little surprise for her when I introduce her to the... We're just introducing Roald Dahl at the moment, so that will be a nice little surprise. But eventually the time came and you decided to leave the Royal Air Force, and I guess it follows a little bit of that retransformation you did in the Air Force, that you then retraded again and retrained to become a journalist. What was that transition out of the RAF like, and going back to school, going to school, to university for the first time, and training as a journalist?
Yeah, so during my time in the Royal Air Force, it was at a time when they didn't have any PR officers. So for some reason, I was always interested in sort of television radio. So whenever a TV crew was visiting our base or out in Turkey, I volunteered to take them around. And I sort of really got interested in the journalism side of things. And I started writing articles for the RAF newspaper whilst I was still serving. And then they had a redundancy scheme called Options for Change in 1997, 98. And with my age, I think I was 28, so I'd done 9-10 years. I was just inside the lowest age that you could possibly be. And it was a really good package. And I had been thinking about it. And my parents thought I was completely mad giving up my commission. But it was quite instinctive. I haven't regretted it. I was quite focused. I'd actually been around a couple of university campuses. I looked at Sheffield Hallam and eventually I went to Leeds Trinity. Real specialist postgrad journalism courses. So I planned my transition. And there was a resettlement package where the RAF actually paid for the course and then paid for some materials that I needed for it, like extra lessons on shorthand writing. But it was a very, very good course. There was only 20 people on the course. And then I did 6 months of postgrad journalism. And that meant I could then apply for full-time journalism jobs, either with BBC, ITV or someone else. But thanks to the RAF, it gave me that proper transition and retraining.
Apart from the opportunity of like looking after and hosting those journalists on those visits, was there anything within your training or experience that you were able to transfer over from the RAF into journalism that advantaged you over others?
Problem solving, having your initiative and things like that. So one of the big stories when I was in ITV, so after a year in BBC Radio, I went to work for ITV in Leeds, and I got to follow Leeds United in the Champions League, and I would be sent off to all the places that they went round Europe, like Moscow, Sofia in Bulgaria, and I would just turn up with a cameraman and be told to make a 3-minute film. And basically you have to I've been trained how to do it at uni, but you had to storyboard it. There was a controversy in Moscow about the pitch being frozen and being cancelled, and I had to try and get an interview with a senior Russian official about why the game had been cancelled and stuff. And I just turned up at his hotel and I had to try and sort of blag our way to get to the first floor where he was to get an interview. But I used a bit of my basic Russian, privyet, oishun priatna, and I basically sort of got up there, got an interview, and did it as part of my report. So I would say, having been in the military, a bit of initiative, problem solving, but also team spirit, taking my cameraman with me, making him feel part of it, looking after him, because it was quite long hours, but then also enjoying the downtime by having a really good meal somewhere in the evening and sort of enjoying the experience.
And before we leave the journalism behind and go on to the political story, did you have political stories to pick up as a journalist? Was that where the interest started to manifest?
Yeah, so my first job in the media, I was in BBC Radio, based in Middlesbrough, where I've been doing some recruitment, and I got a job with BBC Radio Tees. It was called BBC Radio Cleveland, and the local MPs at the time who I got to interview was Mo Mowlam, who was the Northern Ireland Secretary in 1997, Peter Mandelson from Hartlepool, Tony Blair from Sedgefield, Alan Milburn from Darlington was the health secretary, and the leader of the opposition, Northallerton, was William Hague.
Wow.
They were my 5 local MPs, and they were basically the heart of the British political establishment. So I was reporting on them, interviewing them, coming into contact with them, and I started to get a real sort of interest in sort of frontline politics. I interviewed Mo Mowlam a couple of times, an amazing woman.
So what's she like?
Really down to earth. They were going through the Good Friday Agreement at the time, always available for the local BBC radio, as well as being, she would come back to Redcar, having been away, with President Bill Clinton, and then the next day just me, little Jason from local BBC radio, with my Ewer, which was an old reel-to-reel recording device, and she would still find time to give a chat to the local BBC radio station. And as a young reporter, I always appreciated that and had huge admiration for her.
I'm really glad that hearing that first account of that relationship, what she was like, lives up to my view. I had a similar experience actually so I served in Northern Ireland during the Good Friday Agreement as a 18-year-old private soldier on the ground in Belfast, and I was very aware politically at the time. And fast forward, working for the Conservative Party as an agent in London, I got to meet Lord David Trimble, the late great David Trimble, and he'd lived up to my expectation. Years later, over a decade later, I'm sat at dinner with David Trimble talking about history, and it was a real privilege. So I love to hear these little stories about the people you meet along the way. I think it's fair to say that you've been on a bit of a political journey from being a Lib Dem to now a Conservative. And I think today we really do pile on when people change their views or minds about things, particularly in the Twitter sphere. I mean, why do you think people do that, and what made you kind of change your views in your mind?
Well, I haven't changed my views. My views are exactly the same. So I was very, very passionate about there was no need for an invasion of Iraq after the Second Gulf War. And Charlie Kennedy, bless him, with the Lib Dems were campaigning very, very strongly on that. So it was an issue I felt very strongly about. So for a year, I campaigned on that issue. Remember, I'd been in northern Iraq. Saddam Hussein was a caged animal. There was no major human rights abuses. We had a northern no-fly zone, a southern one. We were monitoring everything that he was up to. And in fact, when Saddam Hussein was eventually tried, he was found guilty of the massacre that happened before the first invasion of Kuwait in 1988, Halabja. So, I'm absolutely positive that that was wrong. The Lib Dems were campaigning very, very hard on that issue, and I was happy to be part of that campaign. But when David Cameron became leader of the Conservative Party, I joined up. I was actually in the back of a car with him as a journalist for ITV, and he was heading down to Sheffield, and we were following him for half a day. And I really liked the cut of his jib, because he was really down to earth. Actually, he answered the mobile phone. He had a quick chat with Sam. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. They were going to a family wedding, a friend's wedding at the weekend or something, and they were talking about getting changed between the church service and the evening do, something we've all had to do, one bit's formal ones. And they were sort of discussing that they could pull over in a lay-by and sort of get changed in a lay-by. And I was just thinking that's exactly the same conversation I would probably be having. And I thought he was really down to earth, and he had a really good touch, and he just came across as a decent guy. So I was so proud. My views didn't change, same views, but David Cameron, and I became the parliamentary candidate for my home area, Colne Valley. I was selected in March 2007. I was a hard-working local campaigner candidate for 3 years. And my mum and dad and my constituents, we settled in Huddersfield in the 1980s. They're my constituents still now. They live up the road. And I, relished the opportunity to get elected with David Cameron as our Prime Minister. So my views haven't changed. I've still got the same views. People can look at my voting record. And I'm consistent all the way through. But I'm a very proud Conservative. I've talked about getting people into work and giving people opportunities. My party is so broad. We represent so many, many different views. I hate lazy labelling in politics. I voted for Brexit yeah, I consider myself very liberal when it comes to human rights and looking after child refugees, for example, and very proudly supported equal marriage, and very strong on environmental issues, which is really important to me and my teenage daughters. There's too much lazy labelling, and you're right, Twitter sphere. I was actually hoping, when there was the recent story about people being blocked from reading so many tweets, I was actually hoping, could this be the end of Twitter? Please, yes. Because it is bad for political discourse. There's all sorts of ding-dongs going on now with other ex-military politicians, and it can be really, really unpleasant. But I have a lot of good colleagues, and I'm very, very proud to be a Conservative now, but my views haven't changed. The Conservative Party is a broad church, and I'm very proud that it is.
I had a right grin when you were talking then. First of all, as you're going through his list of issues, I was going, ding, yep, ding, agree with that, ding. But also, and of the Cameron thing, it's no surprise that I got involved in politics because David Cameron inspired me at the time. They also realised that with that, putting your faith behind one person is a risky thing, because when they go, then you start to become vulnerable in terms of where you follow and where you believe, in terms of politics certainly, and other organisations too. But as I've experienced going around the houses, working with cross-party different veterans movements, every time, no matter what political party I've been at party conferences, I've been in the right room every time, because the values of the armed forces values have been more identifiable to me rather than the ideology. So I guess I'm going on a bit of a journey at the moment, but certainly where those views that you were expressing there around some of those key issues, as a father, the environment, absolutely, what future she has, and the more compassionate conservative side of things is absolutely at the core of what I believe. But I don't happen to have a membership of a political party, and perhaps don't know whether I will again. Who knows? So yeah.
But I have some great colleagues. I mean, one of my good pals is Tom Tugendhat. You know, what a visionary, and you know, I believe so much that the Conservative Party has such a bright future with people like Tom Tugendhat in it. Other good friends include Alicia Cairns, who's chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. You know, I sat next to her and she gave a speech on the boycotts bill last Monday, and I looked across to the opposition side, and there wasn't anybody on their back benches that could give a speech like Alicia Cairns. I am so proud to be a Conservative, because the ideas and the vision and the compassion are on my side. You know, all I see on the other side is petty partisanship and Twitter sphere nonsense. But my side has the ideas. Gillian Keegan, the education secretary, you know, being brought up as a teenager in Liverpool, didn't have a fancy education or anything, but leading the way on, education reform. You know, I'm so proud that, we have the ideas, we have the vision, we have the people to take our country forward, and I'm just really proud to be a Conservative.
I'm really proud that my wife got Alicia elected and ran her selection as her agent as well. I'm very proud of Tom Tugendhat, is a veteran of the Intelligence Corps. Both previous guests of the show, so do catch up on their episodes. But two brilliant examples, and I'll slip you the fiver later on for mentioning those two in particular.
We didn't set that
up. But two brilliant examples, absolutely. And I think we all came alive a little bit when Tom stood for the leadership, and the way he engaged. A lot of people that weren't necessarily politically engaged started to feel alive and excited by politics. And he brought something to that campaign, absolutely, as did a couple of the others. But we are where we are. I just really want to move on to talk about political resilience, because you were embedded as a candidate for a while. You were local, you built up all your connections there, worked really hard. All of a sudden, snap election, boom, you lose everything. Period of 2 years in the hiatus, and then you get re-elected. How did you get through those 2 years? That must have been challenging. And I understand that Theresa May apologised to you for that election.
Yeah, I don't think people quite realise that it is brutal when you lose an election, particularly a snap election, and one that wasn't required and it backfired. And myself and my good mate Carl McCartney, the MP for Lincoln, had actually warned Theresa May 3 months earlier, don't be tempted to go early just because you're ahead in the polls, because people don't like that kind of sort of cockiness and confidence. Set your stall out and have a vision for in a couple of years' time. I don't think people realise that is it, that's the end. There isn't a big payoff. I think I got like 2 months' salary while I closed up the office, and that is it. My mum, who's my constituent, was reading the Daily Mail saying, I've read that you get £20,000. No, just got 2 months' salary, and that was it. And then you're unemployed. And you have to look for a job at short notice. I ended up getting a really good job at the University of Huddersfield doing government affairs and helping their work with the industrial strategy. But when I first lost, you mentioned Theresa May, because I had actually warned her. I was just so annoyed, and she ran a really bad election campaign. You can't scare people during an election campaign. She made a real mess of it. I was actually in the pub with my mates, and it was reported in the local newspaper, and we were playing pool on a Sunday night, and my mobile phone went, and I think the chief whip had heard that I was just a bit annoyed with Theresa May, and said she could at least ring round and say how we all doing, and for our team as well, because my team of 5 lost their jobs, and I hung on to try and see them through and look after them. So my phone rang, and it was Theresa May, and I said to my mates, I'll just go outside in the car park, I've got the Prime Minister on the phone. So she did apologise. She was on the way somewhere in the car, but yeah, it was it's brutal for your team, your
and
staff,
your family.
Yeah, but I had resilience. I was worried more about my team. I had two young people in the constituency, so trying to look after them, got them sorted out, with jobs and roles. And do you know what? We stuck together as a team. We're all still in contact. And 2 of those people that lost with me in 2017, when I got re-elected in 2019, came back with me again straight away, because we stayed together. That's the military thing, team spirit. We are all very close. We look after each other's backs. We share the highs and lows together. I've just got 1 person here in Westminster, and then 4 people up in the constituency, so I'm very constituency focused. But yeah, I tried to think back, actually. I was selected again as the parliamentary candidate. I had ruled it out. I thought that was it. And there was a bit in the local paper that was me finished with politics. And I was going to move on with my life. It was a good job at university. I actually finished work at 5:30 in the evening, and the weekends were my own. And it was quite good, actually. And I enjoyed the vibe at university and the positivity there. But then they advertised for parliamentary candidate, and I don't really want someone else being my MP in my area, because I know how hard I work and how I genuinely put the constituency first. So I threw my hat in the ring again. Interestingly, in May 2019, we'd just been trounced in the European elections. We got 9%. Theresa May was on like 20%, and then obviously she fell. Boris Johnson took over as leader. And then we had the snap election in December 2019, and I won my seat back with my hard-working team, and I got the most ever votes in my constituency in over 100 years of results, thanks to a great team effort and thanks to my wonderful constituents. So it's great to be back. But so I always say, because obviously things are a bit challenging at the moment for the Conservative Party, I've won 3 general elections when we're either level pegging, just behind or just ahead. The one I lost, we went into the general election campaign 20 points ahead. Things can change. It's hard to be a leader. It's challenging to be a decision maker, but I'm glad that it's us. There are no easy answers. I listen to the Labour front bench, and if I would say to people listening to this podcast, listen when the Labour people speak about answers, because there's not much there really. There are no easy answers. If there were, we'd be doing it. And I hope that over the next 18 months, I think the general election will be in the autumn next year, we can show that we do have the answers and we do have the vision, And there's no magic solutions to things like this. There's just resolve and hard work and decency and vision. And I think that's what the Conservative Party have got.
Well, you know all about that. I haven't been on the back foot, and so that victory must have been sweet. And people will be able to find a wide range of views on this podcast, obviously being non-party politically aligned, but it's only to be expected that we get all views across on this podcast, and really interested to hear that. But what on those views, on those issues, what do you think will be the issues taken to the country that will win the day? What do you think the key issues are that will win or lose this election?
Well, it's people's day-to-day lives. Something I say regularly at the moment, Johnny, is if people just turned off the news or didn't read a newspaper or didn't listen to the radio for a week.
Or got rid of Twitter off their app.
Yeah, got rid of Twitter. Delete that thing. It's horrible. I've got someone that sort of looks at it for me. If anyone ever tweets a message at me, don't bother. I don't read it. If you just look at the world around you and what the reality is, I went to 6 community events in my patch on Saturday. People are getting out there. They're working together as a community. They're volunteering. I went to an open fire station day where volunteers are helping with the local fire service. I met some wonderful ladies who fundraise for the Yorkshire ambulance. I went to my Ukrainian club, which were running an event and are looking after Ukrainian refugees. I actually have a Ukrainian refugee family that moved in right next door to me. I live in a sort of end of terraced 3-bedroomed house, and there's a Ukrainian family next door to me in the heart of one of my villages. If you see the world around you and people are going on holiday, they're going out for meals, and I do understand that life is tough for some people, and I'm proud of the support that we're giving people on energy bills and with the cost of living. But if people can just see what reality is, and there are tough, challenging times for every country in the world. There are countries in the world where inflation is higher and certainly where unemployment is high. But because my youngest daughter's just gone into work, she tells me about all the opportunities that she's seeing in retail for training, getting a job. She's just switched jobs. She's got a good job. She's enjoying it. She's being paid. She's just moved into her first flat with a friend. She's got a great social life. She works so hard. She got sent to cover another store in Manchester. She got up at 5 a.m, got on the train, spent the day there. That kind of work ethic. But she is enjoying life. She's got responsibility. She's working hard. She's paying taxes, which pays for the NHS and education. If people could just see the real world away from Twitter sphere and the corrosive cynicism that's out there, maybe they can see the bigger picture. And to answer your question, we need to be able to show, as the Conservative Party, that we are investing in education and the health service. I've got a brand new A&E unit that's opening at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. There is investment in schools. My college has a £30 million new lab building that's being made. That there are some good things that are happening, but there is no magic answers to these things. And if you listen really carefully to what the opposition are saying, there's not really much substance there. And that's what we need to be able to show, that your life is okay. And if you fall on hard times, we will support you. But there are opportunities out there. Show some leadership, show some resolve, and have people like, as well as the Prime Minister, Tom Tugendhat, Alicia Cairns, Gillian Keegan, these great Conservative voices out there showing that we are a modern, progressive, compassionate party.
And I think I love the way that we ended up talking about a younger person in work. It's kind of where we started, with your own backgrounds as a young person, joined the Royal Air Force. And I think that is the optimism we should leave this episode on. But any final thoughts to any young person thinking about joining the Armed Forces today?
I'd highly recommend it. It set me up for life. It gave me confidence, adventure. As a young officer, I was like 19, 20 years of age. And I turned up to my first posting. The interesting thing, Johnny, as an RAF person, you get posted as an individual. Obviously, in the army, you're in a regiment or a corps and you move together. So you get to know, you move as a team. And in the Navy, you're on a ship and things like that. So I turned up to my first base, not really knowing anybody. And And I was in charge of like 25, 30 people who all called me sir and saluted me at the age of 20. But I remember I had a really good sergeant and I wasn't quite sure what to do. But I've been learned that you take advice, and as soon as you adopt that advice, it's your order. You're in charge. You take responsibility. So that responsibility, whatever rank you are, responsibility, respect, structure. And there's one thing, PQs, personal qualities in life, the way in which you conduct yourself, with decency and respect for your team building, team spirit, togetherness, shared experience. I've built a team that supports me, and I would recommend joining the military to any young person. It will set you up for life. Just watch those adverts, the Newcastle lad going around the world. You could be going to Las Vegas, you could be going to Turkey or Akrotiri in Cyprus. And as I say, if you want to train as a driver, a medical person, a technician, get the Air Force to pay for your training. You get paid while you're doing it. You get a great sense of adventure. You can do lots of sport, and then maybe go on and do something else in your life. It'll set you up for life. I can't recommend it highly enough.
And maybe, just maybe, you might become an MP.